guys, welcome to United View and welcome to a special edition of the Tactical View. Today I'm joined by AFTV's James, the tactical guru from AFTV, ready to look ahead to the Arsenal game on Sunday. What was supposed to be a title race until around about 9:30 PM last night, which now might look like it's over for Manchester United fans, but you guys still very much in it.
It's been a crazy season. I mean, from missing out on top four to jumping to what we're hoping to achieve this season. Who knew that we'd A, be talking about a title race, but B, be in a position where, you know, we've got an opportunity to extend a real lead on third place. We've got an opportunity to extend a lead on Man City. I can't remember who they're playing this weekend, but the fact that we've been looking at that shows how far this Arsenal team's come. So, of course, it's good times. We're excited. We're excited for this one. I'm nervy about it as well. I know you just mentioned there Casemiro, you know, obviously getting the booking. You know, I said to you off camera, I wanted to play Man United with Casemiro. And I will say, I feel we can beat you with Casemiro. I feel you can beat us without him. I really think that the quality on show, you know, the money spent on both these squads, you know, and what Arteta and Ten Hag are doing as managers, their stocks are on the up. I really think you could see any result in this game. But I thought with everything going on, the Rodri, Partey, Casemiro debate, I'd love to have seen Casemiro in that game. But either way, we've still got plenty to worry about in that United team. To
be honest, you sound more optimistic about United's chances than I am at this point, but either way, it'll be a great tactical battle.
I've seen worse United teams come to the Emirates and win. I remember put XG on the map was when we lost 3-1, but De Gea had the game of his life. You know, it's games like that make me think United, just for the quality they've got, and I always think history plays a part. You've come to the Emirates and got results before, and it just wouldn't surprise me if you put in a good performance. It really wouldn't.
Look, Scott McTominay has a world-class game every once in a while. Let's just hope it's at the Emirates on Sunday.
Yeah, you might have to turn to him, absolutely.
Exactly. So let's get into the tactics. First of all, I'm going to ask you to bring up your sort of preferred 11, what you think is going to start for Arsenal and how you think Arteta's going to set them up.
All right, we'll keep it simple because I just think it's the 11 that's been going out, and to a degree, that probably makes Arsenal a little unpredictable because if there's one thing about Man City, even though they're not having their best season, at least it kind of gets you wondering, well, who's going to be playing? Who's, you know, is it going to be Walker or Cancelo or both? Is it going to be, you know, Gundogan or Bernardo Silva? With Arsenal, I think you know who's going to be out there. Is that back four of Ramsdale, White, Saliba, Gabriel Zinchenko, Odegaard, Partey. Let's find Granit Xhaka. Here he is.
That's no pep roulette from Arteta.
What's that, sorry?
No pep roulette from Arteta this time.
No, I think he'll be keeping it very simple. He'll be keeping it, you know, what's going... But well, Arteta does have a tendency sometimes to just mix it up for no reason. But I think that is the 4-3-3 shape we're going to see. Eddie leading the line, Saka, Martinelli either side, Xhaka, Odegaard, Partey, and then the back five that we mentioned.
Okay, so as a Manchester United fan then, looking at this straight away, compared to this sort of how City played last week, obviously with Arteta and Ten Hag both sort of being Pep Guardiola descendants or disciples, what concerns me and what's a bit different is that Cancelo very much played right on the touchline for City against us, whereas we know straight away that Zinchenko here isn't going to do that. So talk me a bit through the way Zinchenko's expected to play and how that might differ from what Cancelo did.
He's unbelievable. I was listening to Arscast Extra with Gunner Blog, and he described him as the queen on a chessboard because he can literally go anywhere, and that is what he does. Now, if we there's things about Arsenal that are very Man City, and that is the eights getting forward into the pockets, that front five, the wingers being really wide, and so what they tended to do was have their fullbacks tuck in to form a three. It was a shield in front of the back.
So this is Man City?
This is the Man City way of approaching it. Arsenal, however, and I really noticed it at Stamford Bridge when we went 1-0, will play White, Saliba, Gabriel often as a back three, and then they feed through these two. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, well, ultimately Zinchenko's kind of doing the same thing, right? He's a left back, but he's coming a little bit more central. But just don't underestimate what he does in terms of, he might be here, but if Partey drops in, he might just come round, combine a little bit with Odegaard. He might even drive into this space, and Granit Xhaka will sit and be one of the two building. He might even overlap Martinelli, who comes inside to get into more, I call it Sadio Mane type inside forward positions. He honestly gives us an unbelievable amount of fluidity. Now, people talk about what he does on the ball. Off the ball, he's fantastic as well. I mean, honestly, his positioning, his ability to intercept a header, when he's coming inside, it often encourages a team to go for the switch quite quickly, but he's very good at reading that and winning the header and dealing with the trouble as well. Zinchenko's been absolutely massive for us. Now, that's not to say that a player like Rashford couldn't really sort of take advantage of the fact that he might be caught in no man's land sometimes, and I'm sure we'll discuss that in a little bit. But in terms of what we do on the ball, he has been unreal and as important as any signing we've made in the last few years.
Yeah, so looking at the setup there, what's quite interesting is that a lot of teams obviously want to have in midfield 2 targets ahead of the ball. So in this case, you've got Odegaard and Granit Xhaka pushing on.
Yeah.
But you've managed to do that in a way without losing, having 2 players here to build through.
Yeah.
And that is what makes Arsenal, for me, so difficult to play against at the moment, because where against Manchester City, we had Christian Eriksen and Anthony Martial sort of stopping Rodri play.
Yeah.
And that stopped basically everything City did in terms of playing through the middle of the pitch. I think against Arsenal, with 2 players that you can build through deeper, that makes that job so much harder for opposition teams.
Yeah, and I think it was the Europa League semi-final where Villarreal and Unai Emery beat us, and they really suffocated Thomas Partey. They just stopped him playing, and often that became the sort of, well, if Partey's missing, or if Partey, is stopped, that's how you stop Arsenal. But now they've just added another player to go through. Partey wasn't flawless at Spurs. He played very well, but he wasn't flawless by any means. Zinchenko was just doing the same thing on the other side. And the fact that we've got those avenues and 3 very natural centre-backs who can sort of cover there, win the headers. I think the second goal comes from Saliba winning his header on Kane, and then we go and build from there. But at the same time, like I said, there's a lot of tactical fluidity. There was a moment in the West Ham game where I saw Partey was quite deep next to Saliba about to win the ball. And, obviously on camera, on broadcast, you can only see so much of the pitch. And then I noticed Saka had tucked inside, Partey plays a pass, or I think it was Odegaard, and Ben White had overlapped. He'd added that as well. So what Arsenal have been able to do, and what Arteta's built, is a team that is so tactically fluid, because you've got players that can play in all these positions very, very comfortably. Now, some I didn't foresee, like Ben White being able to overlap and do that side of things, but others, it makes sense. Zinchenko, a former midfielder, converted left back, the way he's used him is fascinating, and it's a big part of what allows us to get control in games.
Yeah, so we'll move on a little bit later and talk about sort of United's defensive structure, how it might all work. But I do want to say the thing that concerns me most is the triangles that Arsenal tend to form either side. So you've got the Zinchenko, Xhaka, Martinelli triangle wide left. And on the right side, you've got something similar with Saka, Odegaard in the half space, and then Ben White, and sometimes it'll be Thomas Partey there instead.
Yeah.
But those triangles either side worry me, and the reason for that is that obviously typically teams will defend sort of the wider spaces with 2 players, whether that be the fullback and the winger, or sometimes the fullback and the nearest sort of defensive midfielder tucking across. But obviously if you do that against a 3, you're going to have an overload, so it makes things difficult to defend in the wide areas, as well as what we've discussed previously in terms of Arsenal building up through the centre with the extra player.
Yeah, I completely agree. That is something that Arsenal fans have been really enjoying, is the partnerships they've been forming. You're right with the 3 there and the 3 here. And actually, a little weapon that Arsenal have been deploying, when Ben White gets the ball wide and Saka's sort of on the touchline, if we actually just get a football out, there we go, let's get this out. He rather than, sometimes that ball will go in beyond, but rather than give it to feet and maybe look for a 1-2, he often rolls it into Saka's path as he's coming inside, and he kind of takes away the need for Saka to do the work to get around the defender by going, well, I'll just put the ball there.
Yeah.
And Saka can just run right onto it, which makes it very difficult for fullbacks. And those little understandings, they're really small things, but they've been massive to the way Arsenal have been able to just keep the opposition constantly guessing. Because then when you look at the goal at Spurs, that comes from Partey just going, oh, Saka's made a run in beyond, and we'll find that as well. So the fact that Saka's asking different questions and Martinelli does the same with the fullbacks is also what allows that unpredictability and that fluidity between the triangles on the wings.
Yeah, again, looking at the profiles of wingers you've got either side, compared to Manchester City, I mean, in the tactical view after that, I discussed how Foden on one side and Morris on the other side, they tend to be quite static in terms of they'll stop the ball, then they'll do their thing either side. Saka and Martinelli are prepared to run onto things, and that means that when the ball goes wide from Arsenal, you can get in behind, they can come short, but everything happens so quickly. You can't afford to let the ball get wide, because if you give these guys space either side, I mean, Saka's brilliant. He can do pretty much everything at full tilt. Yeah. And that's one of the biggest differences with players like Mahrez, who tend to slow the game down a little bit. Saka and Martinelli keep that tempo up, and it makes it so hard to defend.
You're spot on. I can't really add much more to that on Saka, and you're so right the way you said it about full tilt. He's got that ability to just run onto it, just not break stride when he's attacking opposition. Because when you're a team at Arsenal and you've been, and listen, you'll know this as a United fan, because United have been doing so much, you've been on the up and Ten Hag's doing a brilliant job. Teams start to suss out, okay, they're getting good. maybe they drop a little bit deeper, and you don't have the same time. Now, when you're not as good and maybe you're on the up, there's that opportunity to kind of go a bit more punch for punch. Maybe you catch opposition out. But when they're expecting, okay, we're going to have to do a lot of defending today, Saka doesn't have the same amount of time. Odegaard doesn't have the same amount of time to make the decisions. They've got to be quick decisions. That Odegaard, I keep referencing the goals at Spurs, but they're quick decisions in, am I going to run at Sessegnon, or am I going to come inside and give it to Odegaard? Am I going to play that ball in behind? You've got to make these decisions quickly, because that's the only way you're going to catch out deep blocks, deep defences that want to frustrate you.
Yeah, so I think now if we move on to Manchester United's expected team, I think...
I'm fascinated by this, by the way. I'm really interested to see what you go for.
Yeah, I think lots of it will be fairly similar to what we've gone with recently. Obviously, David De Gea is not going to be changed, is he?
No.
I think at centre-back, we will probably expect Rafael Varane. I think that's pretty much nailed on at this point. On the right, Wan-Bissaka, he's been playing brilliantly of late, and he could be vital against Martinelli. So that's potentially a good selection.
I'm glad to see him doing well. I always liked him, and he always had the defensive base, and I'm happy for him. I'm really happy that Ten Hag's getting the best out of these players that were sort of written off, and he's always seemed a good guy, and I'm happy he's doing well.
Yeah, he seems... What I like about him is he's not gone and done any stupid interviews, not done anything silly. He's just got his head down, worked really hard, and you've got to give him full credit for the improvement he's made. I think now, this is where it starts to get a little bit interesting, because obviously with Casemiro suspended, you've got that extra question mark. Now, in terms of the reason Luke Shaw played at centre-back against City, Ten Hag's come out and said that due to Haaland's physical profile, obviously being massive, being really strong, really quick, Luke Shaw was probably a better option to have there. Now, against Eddie Nketiah, he's probably not quite the same physical presence that Erling Haaland's got, so that's less true. But I think with Casemiro suspended, we might be set for a surprise selection in midfield.
That is really interesting. Okay, what have you got for me? So
I've got Luke Shaw at left centre-back, Tyrell Malacia at left-back, and then in midfield, where I see the slight surprise coming in, where is the man? There he is. Lisandro Martinez. Now, he's played there for Ajax in a couple of important Champions League games. I'm not going to say it was his dominant position or anything, but he's able to drop in there in some of the really important games they've had. So I'm excited to see how he does.
Nice.
And look, to be honest, without Casemiro there, I think we need a midfield destroyer. And I think the best thing about Martinez is the passing angles he gives us on his left foot. But part of the problem, I guess, that does throw up is that his likely partner, Fred, is also left-footed. So whereas normally a left-footer provides you balance that you wouldn't otherwise get, here we've probably gone the other way with two left-footers in midfield.
Fair enough. Interesting that McTominay doesn't get the nod.
Yeah, we mentioned him earlier, and look, he has got the odd world-class game in him now and then, but I just think Martinez and Fred, for the mobility that we're going to need to have to deal with the triangles that Arsenal have, the probable overloads they're going to have with the 3v2s either side, we're going to need Fred there. He's pretty much a shoo-in, he has to play. Alongside him, I think we need the steal of Martinez there.
Fair enough. Okay, interesting.
I think up front, stick Anthony Martial in there. Now, I know he's been injured and didn't play against Palace, but I think he pushed himself through that first 45 minutes against Manchester City. I think he'll do something similar against Arsenal. I think whether he's got having injections, painkillers, whatever it is, I think he'll do it so that he can play against Arsenal.
Interesting.
Now,
so Bruno on the left.
Bruno on the left, Rashford on the right.
Oh, Malacia's fallen out the team.
Oh, Malacia's dropped off, yeah. We'll get him back in. Now, I want to share with you a quote from Erik ten Hag on Bruno Fernandes's role against Manchester City, because I think this is really interesting. So, against City, we played with the wingers on the opposite side. So, Fernandes was on the right, Rashford was on the left. And what Ten Hag had to say after the game was this. The idea was, with Bruno on the right wing, especially in defending, but he defended, I think, as usual, but in possession, he had a role to come in between the lines to bring an extra player there, to bring the opponent problems and hesitation and confusion. He said he thought Bruno played that role versus City really brilliantly on the right and on the left also, later in the game when he switched over to the left side. And he thinks the rest of the team adapted well to the situation and we had really good breaks by finding the free man. Now, what I think will happen against Arsenal is that it'll be the other way round. Now, with Zinchenko on the left side for Arsenal, I think we'll want Rashford up against him to make sure that Zinchenko can't afford to come too far into the middle of the pitch, knowing full well that if Arsenal lose it, Rashford's able to get down the line at pace and cause problems. And I think, conversely on the opposite side, with Ben White tending to stick sort of in the right-hand side and those channels not really inverting as much, I think Fernandes being there in transition, likewise, if he tucks infield, he can drag Ben White out of position and potentially leave space for someone else. So I think it will be a similar idea to what he said, to what Ten Hag had against City, but maybe the opposite way around in the way we execute it.
You know what, that would be fascinating, because I don't know how many managers have thrown real tactical headaches at Arteta. And Arteta, you know, Arsenal have pressed phenomenally all season. They've wanted to go man for man. And against Spurs, we press in a few different ways. But it will be fascinating, you know. How does Arteta adapt for... Okay, so Rashford, for example, he'll probably be one-on-one with Gabriel a lot. So is that something that Arteta wants to invite? Does he want to say to Zinchenko, listen, forget Rashford, you just do your thing, and Gabriel will trust to do the one-on-one duel? He did that with Saliba on Son. If Bruno Fernandes come inside, will Ben White follow him, or will Partey and Zinchenko together go, cool, well, you get Eriksen, I get Bruno? It really is a tactically fascinating game. It wouldn't surprise me if Arsenal don't press as much this game as we've seen in others. If they just go, you know what, let's just see a little bit what Man United can do trying to play through our lines. Because he's done that a few times. He has been happy to drop. We actually ended the Spurs game with less possession. He has been happy to concede possession at times, but he just wants to set the tone with a fast start, get some goals and try and, you know, rattle the team a little bit and give our team a little bit of confidence so they can hurt the opposition. So I'm very fascinated to see how we approach something like this. But you're right, it kind of makes sense to switch them over and get Rashford to attack this space that's going to open up.
Yeah, so one thing you mentioned there in terms of defensive setup and going man for man, that is something that really does intrigue me at the moment, because that's something quite similar to the way United have been defending of late. So what I want to come on to now is discussing some of the tactical battles, and particularly to start with United's defensive setup. So in recent weeks, what we've seen quite a lot of is when opposition teams are building out from the back, United tend to go man for man in midfield. So what we typically see, let's say against City, this was instead of Odegaard, it was Kevin De Bruyne. Fred was sitting right on top of him, with Casemiro sitting right on top of Bernardo Silva, the opposite side. Now, if you do that against Arsenal, I worry about the area that will open up for certain other players to tuck into. So I worry quite a lot about this space here. And the reason for that is, obviously, if Martinez and Fred, let's say, are man-to-man on Xhaka and Odegaard, what's going to happen here is you get Saka tucking inside, and Nketiah dropping in, Martinelli dropping in. So if you go man-for-man, unless our wingers are willing to track back and help out there, or unless the fullbacks are willing to come in here, we're going to have a problem where these two, the double pivot there, gets overloaded.
Yeah, so I think you're absolutely right to be worried about that area, but in a slightly different way. I think Martinelli and Saka will fancy themselves in the 1-on-1. Even if they don't have a lot of joy, I think even just to open up the pitch.
Positionally, just stay wide to spread the United back four.
I think where that overload might occur, Eddie absolutely drops in. Xhaka and Odegaard will try and get in those pockets, but it goes back to the whole Zinchenko thing again. So does that become a 3-on-4? Does this, or even a 5-on-3?
Yeah.
You know, does this become an area of the pitch where Bruno might need to come in like this? I wouldn't surprise me if United go a little 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2. How many twos are in there?
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if they go a little man-for-man or something like this, invite Varane to come short on Eddie or something like that, because I think you're right. That is an area of the pitch that Arsenal can dominate. I just wonder how they'll go about that, because you're absolutely right. I mean, Martinelli has often at times... Let's move everyone back for a second. Marseille has often at times sort of dropped into this pocket of space as well to try get the ball and try link up in the way Alexis Sanchez did a lot of the time for us. But I just don't think it comes very naturally to him. And I think Arteta's wanted to drop that quite quickly, that idea of, well, Martinelli can come inside and maybe Zinchenko can overlap. I don't think that will be the case. I think you'll find our wingers really, really wide. But that is a very crucial area of the pitch.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting what you're saying there. If the wingers are very wide and very high, obviously in terms of the offside line, that moves it a little bit deeper for United, which means that obviously if Luke Shaw or Varane are following Eddie and Nketiah in, there's then going to be potentially more space for Odegaard, Granit Xhaka to get in beyond. And that gap between the defensive line and the midfield pivot could really open up, which could be an area that causes United problems.
Yeah.
But what I want to talk about here is what you said there in terms of Zinchenko inverting, Partey going there. Because against City, as we said, if this was Rodri, he had Eriksen and Martial stopping him getting the ball. Because Ten Hag knew that if you control Rodri, you can control City. But against Arsenal, you can't do that because they've got two players in this area. So if Eriksen sits on Partey there, is it going to be Martial that sort of tries to screen Zinchenko? But the problem is then, if you screen Zinchenko with Martial, depending on Rashford's positioning, when Gabriel gets the ball, if we just get a football on here, all that Martinelli has to do is just drop in if Rashford's fairly narrow. He can receive that ball straight away, and Arsenal are straight through. So the number of problems that Arsenal are going to throw us in build-up is something that is we've not really been tested in that way yet this season.
Do Man United press? Would you consider yourselves a pressing team?
we like to sort of sit in a mid-block for most of the time, but when the opposition team are sort of building out from deep, what we did against City, which obviously we won't be able to do against Arsenal, is that because they had their fullbacks fairly wide, our wingers' pressing lines, when the centre-backs received the ball, they pressed sort of from the outside in to try and force City, funnel them down the centre of the pitch, where we had Fred, Casemiro and Christian Eriksen really tight man-for-man. So the idea then, when we were pressing high, was funnel them into here so we can win the ball in an area where one or two passes were in, because the City fullbacks aren't going to recover, they're so wide. But against Arsenal, you can't do that because there's a numerical advantage for them there with Zinchenko tucking in. So it throws up a whole new issue.
Again, this is really fascinating, this game, because Arsenal, from day one under Arteta, when we scored that goal in the FA Cup semi-final against City, everyone talks about the playing out the back. Early in that move, Ceballos had an opportunity to turn and play forward. He didn't. He actually turned back towards goal and went back to the keeper. Now, at the time, you're probably thinking, what are you doing? But actually, Arsenal really want to invite the press. They really want Martial to try and press Ramsey. They want Eriksen to come forward. They want Bruno to come all the way to White or Saliba. And if they do that, then Zinchenko and Partey can have their fun. If they don't and they sit in a block, then Arsenal have to be creative. Against West Ham in the first half, we created some chances, but we had to be quite creative. Newcastle, in the first 5 minutes of the game at the Emirates, they tried to press, but then we could have been 3-0 up, and honestly, in the first 5 minutes, that's how good the chances were, and they recognised, okay, no, let's just close the space. So again, I'm fascinated to see what Ten Hag does early on, whether he does go to press or he just says, listen, let's just let them have the ball in the back three and let's see what they can do to try and break us down, see what we can offer on the counter-attack. But you're right, there is a numerical advantage, but Arsenal, Zinchenko will sometimes go out there if they feel, well, look, the space is there, so why not? And then it's up to Xhaka to drop in or move out or whatever. There is a lot of fluidity, and it's because there's a lot of players that, like I mentioned earlier, are comfortable popping up in lots of different areas of the pitch. So I think it's all down to whether United try and press or not. If they don't, then I think you'll have quite a lot of joy in trying to stop us play through the middle.
I think one of the other things as well that teams can... One of the other issues you can have is that obviously there's 11 players on the pitch, so if you've got an overload somewhere, you're not going to have it somewhere else. Now, one of the issues that a lot of teams have is that if Zinchenko were to tuck in there for a lot of teams, then they've got maybe a 3-on-3 against the front three of the opposition. But for Arsenal, what can happen is because Aaron Ramsdale is so comfortable with the ball at his feet, he can sometimes step in here, so he's actually still a back four, really, and you've got the keeper able to sort of step in as well, so that actually you've not really lost that numerical advantage anyway. You've still got it here. You've got it here on this line, and you've got it here as well. So I think the value there of Ramsdale stepping in is so important, and something that can't really be overlooked if United choose to just try and sit in the middle or a high block, is that you've got the extra number here. So you can just circulate the ball, tire United out, and then eventually shift the ball forward when the space appears.
His ability on the ball is phenomenal. Honestly, when we signed him, no one knew that this guy was so good on the ball, except for Mikel Arteta and the scouting department. And so often as well, when he does have the ball to feet, and they're looking for a build-up, and whether it's Gabriel or Zinchenko, whatever, so often that clip pass to White. We actually saw that a lot at Old Trafford. Yeah. We really had a lot of joy with that at Old Trafford. It's a big part of why we were able to start moves and play through quite easily, really. We just didn't do enough in the final third. But that clip pass to White is not quite as good as Zinchenko. I don't know why. He always gets the Ben White one right. I don't know if that's just where he's facing and whatever, I don't know, technique based. But yeah, the way he plays on the ball is a big part. And Arsenal as well haven't been afraid. And we saw this a lot against Man City when we actually lost at the Emirates when we played them last year. But it was that long ball out to Martinelli to go, right, let's go for the one-on-one. So the other question is, how good is Wan-Bissaka in the air? There's those kind of, I know he's defensively brilliant, but he's got that option round to ask lots of different questions with his distribution. So I think you'll see Arsenal try quite a few different things in the first 10 minutes, even 20 minutes, and then just see almost where it goes from there, kind of what they're having joy with and what they go, okay, this is working well, let's go from there.
Yeah, so what I think is really interesting there with the in terms of Ramsdale on the ball is that United's press has been fairly narrow. So we tend to set up with our front three against the opposition centre-backs and goalkeeper. So let's say Martial, Rashford, Fernandes against these three here. And then what that does leave is that if Martial goes, the others have to go. And all that does is it makes this gap here between the centre-back and the full-back even bigger. So it makes it even easier for the keeper to get that target, that clip ball in there, and you've broken the press. Yeah, so for that reason, as you say, I don't expect United to press too high. No, I think it will mainly be waiting for very specific triggers, such as maybe Thomas Partey facing his own goal, taking the ball, would be one of them, I would suggest.
A bad touch. Honestly, Zinchenko's got a few in it. He's fantastic on the ball, but he had one or two loose touches. Tottenham knee broke. Yeah, sometimes it's about just wait for them to get it wrong, and that's not to say for what it's worth, United fans watching this, obviously on United View, I've predicted a draw. I think United will come and give us a really tough game. I think you've got the ability also to get goals out of nothing. You've just got players that can do that. Anthony's not been brilliant, but we know he can get a goal out of nothing. And
he did in the first
exactly,
game.
Exactly. And I think for that reason, I am nervous as an Arsenal fan. But I would think Man United's best way, yes, they can take the game to us. Yes, they can go punch for punch. But I just think if you're just patient and you're calm, like you were at Old Trafford, the spaces will open up, in my opinion.
I do agree. I think we had 30% possession against Man City, and I think it's going to have to be something fairly similar here.
Maybe,
so the last thing I want to talk about is how do we think United can hurt Arsenal? So I think this sort of picture is something I'm going to see a fair amount during the game.
Yeah.
And obviously what we've got is, as we spoke about earlier, we've got the wide triangles either side. You've got Zinchenko, Xhaka, Martinelli. And on the other side here, you've got potentially Ben White, Saka and Odegaard. They'll be causing all sorts of issues, and obviously Eddie and Nketiah dropping in here can cause issues for the double pivot if we go man for man in that area. But how can United spring a counter-attack on Arsenal? How can we get that counter-punch? So as an Arsenal fan, what was your biggest fear from this setup?
Against Spurs, they were seeing the fact that we were leaving a back three in White, Saliba and Gabriel as an opportunity to then attack the wings. They thought, okay, well, that's the space, so let's attack it. I think the best way is for Martial to peel off and hit that space in between, and Rashford to come central and hit that space in between, because there's a degree of confusion. Well, does Gabriel follow him, or does Saliba come across? If Saliba comes across, does White cover? All these kind of things. Now, Arsenal went man for man against Spurs, so they'll have a plan. And if they go, no, we'll go man for man. If he comes in here, I'll follow him. And if he pulls out wide, I'll follow him. Then fine. Maybe there's nothing you can do about it. But generally, I thought Tottenham's willingness to try and hit Sessegnon or Doherty or Kulusevski and Son to go wide and then try to find themselves one-on-one, it didn't work. And I think it's lulling them into a false sense of security. Oh, wow, there's space out wide. Zinchenko's coming to midfield. Let's go attack that space. Yep, Rashford could do it. He's got the pace. He could absolutely take advantage of that. But I would be thinking that's coming inside. And by the way, that's not because I've seen teams hurt Arsenal in that way. That's because I'm just suggesting. I know Arsenal fans watch. They get on me on AFTV. They go, "Why are you giving away tactics?" I'm not giving away anything. Trust me, they're not watching what I have to say on this. Ten Hag and all them. But I do think it would ask a different question of those defenders. I definitely think no one's really gone, well, can we pierce them through the middle? That's what Liverpool did when they got a few goals at the Emirates. Firmino, Jota, Nunes, they're making those runs from centre-back to full-back, in between, targeting those spaces. Was it my man or your man? Those are the conversations you want Gabriel and Saliba having.
Yeah, for me, I agree with everything you said, but for me, the biggest way United can hurt Arsenal is something we did against City, and we did it against you in the first game at Old Trafford. When we won the ball back, we played 1- and 2-touch passes in this sort of area first. Let's say Varane wins it back. It was out to Martinez quickly, out to Eriksen, and then the ball goes in behind. It's 2 or 3 passes to draw you in. And look, the weakness of Arsenal, in the sense it's a strength because you've got the triangles either side, causes issues for the opposition. But what it means is that when Zinchenko gets dragged forward, when Ben White gets dragged forward, it means that in this area here, only Thomas Partey's there. So as long as Martial keeps Saliba out the way, Rashford's able to sort of keep Gabriel focused on what's behind him, so he's retreating. In this area here, there is space. So what we saw really effectively was balls from midfield through to Eriksen, or I think it was Eriksen in this position, play 1 or 2 touch, get the ball there, and then get it out there.
You know
if we
what?
can do that quickly, that can kill Arsenal.
You're so right. I mean, I was referencing other goals, but you're so right. Look at Old Trafford. You pierce through the middle. So there you go. So United United already know how to try and tear Arsenal on the counter attack. So those goals are proof that those runs, those central runs, the quick passing, and letting Bruno or Eriksen just have something to hit, a space to hit, you can cause Arsenal problems.
It's exactly that. And if Ben White's quite wide here, Bruno Fernandes, as we've said, he did against City, from the right-hand side, he can tuck in off the left, receive a pass, and we know, on transition, he is one of the best in the world at finding those balls over the top, those long balls for Martial and Rashford. And as happened at Old Trafford, Rashford versus Gabriel in a 1v1, I know who I'm backing.
Gabriel. Listen, I think that's a really good battle. Gabriel's quick. Gabriel's really quick. Rashford's probably quicker. But is he quicker with the ball at his feet? So that, I think, is what's going to be interesting. Is it, can you play it in behind so that he doesn't have to do the carrying himself? That is the big question. I want to ask you something else, actually, just very quickly about the starting 11, because I know that you've opted for Lissandro Martinez in midfield, but I just want to show very quickly, if it's all right. I'll do it in a red circle.
Yeah.
I've got here Luke Shaw, I've got Fred, I've got Martinez, I've got Rashford, and I've got Bruno Fernandes, all playing in positions they're not naturally in. Is that I mean, is that not something you're a little bit worried about? And then you could even say Malacia doesn't play week in, week out, nor does Wan-Bissaka. Is that not a little bit too much tweaking for a big game?
It's a lot of tweaking, but I think these guys are all tactically intelligent enough to do things. And
Fair enough.
as much as Ole Gunnar Solskjaer gets a lot of criticism for the stuff he changed the framework of the team week in, week out. So these guys had to adapt to whatever instructions they were given week in, week out. They've got that within them. So I think we're more than able to adapt to that.
Yeah, fair enough. It's the only thing I think. Maybe that's something, but listen, you've got some talented players out there, so we'll see. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be a fascinating one.
Yeah, 22 talented players on the pitch. It'll be a fascinating tactical battle between two Guardiola disciples.
Yeah.
Let's see who comes
Very
out on
true.
top.
It's been a pleasure, Cam. Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers, man.
Best of
Cheers for
luck,
coming on.
I think.
Cheers for watching. Smash a like down below if you've enjoyed it. Let us know what you think of the video. And of course, we'll be back on Monday to break down how it all went.